Hi, everybody. Welcome to Coshun Cast. We are ready to rock and roll here this afternoon. It is just after 4 o'clock Central Time, or just after 5 o'clock Eastern here on February 16th. And everyone knows what 5 o'clock means. So good to have you aboard. Grab a cocktail and enjoy some sports talk with myself, Craig Coshun, and producer extraordinaire, James Stewart. How you doing, pal?
Doing good today.
How's the technical guru doing and everything? Technically, are we sound?
I think technically we're going to make it through. We're working on it. But I think technically is always, it's always, you'll see what happens whenever you're doing anything on the internet. So
we'll just throwing that out there. We have Kane Pitman, who's going to be joining us from Australia, his home country. And he has been covering the Milwaukee Bucks for the last several years. Up close at times and from a distance at most times. And he's got a unique story in being a sports reporter that he's going to share with us and banter around and talk a little Bucks basketball. And so that'll be coming up here. He's going to join us in just a moment. But I guess first and foremost, just to get the show rolling here and stuff, James, we had the Super Bowl obviously a few days ago. It lived up to its billing of all these close games that have been going on in the NFL playoffs, which makes all of our lives entertaining. Unfortunately, we all expected baseball, according to schedule, to pick up, and that's obviously still on the down low right now. The lockout's still going on, so we're kind of in a unique week because we have the NBA All-Star break coming up as well later this weekend. So really for almost a week, unless you're a college basketball lover, there ain't much going on.
Right. There's a real lull in sports. But the good thing is, the All-Star break is I guess more of entertainment for sure, as opposed to, basketball competitiveness and whatnot. So we do have that. We have Giannis in the All-Star weekend with his brother, so that should be fun to watch. And then, once we get back from the All-Star break, it's the sprint to the playoffs. And that's the funnest part, or the most fun part about the NBA, is kind of that chase leading up to the playoffs. And then, at that point, the next season starts.
Yep. And so, I know. I mean, time just seems to fly that way. But Bucks coming off a nice win last night over Indiana, as Giannis didn't play Monday against Portland in that loss, but returned against the Pacers, had 50 points. I believe it was his third 50-point plus game of his career. He was only 2 points off a career high, and I think he missed his last 3 free throws. But, hey, dude scored 19 points alone in the fourth quarter, and for whatever reason, this team needed all 50 of those to get that win over a new makeshift-look Pacer team.
Yeah, and it felt like you could tell from the beginning. It felt like Giannis was he came out in attack mode, and like you said, the 19 points in the fourth quarter. I really feel like people are still forgetting that he leads the league in fourth quarter points. So I mean, this you can say who's the closer and who's clutch and whatever, but at the end of the day, the guy has the most points in the fourth quarter. So to me, he's closing out games.
Yep, for sure. So we're going to bring in Kane Pitman now to talk more about the Milwaukee Bucks and his experience from Australia. And Kane, welcome to Coshun Cast. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning. You gave all those local times. You didn't give Australian time, Craig. What's going on?
I think it's around, I'm guessing, 9 o'clock in the morning.
You're a professional. I know that you looked up your world clock. So 10:09 a.m. Thursday. No cocktail for me.
Well, so you got coffee, right?
I've got coffee.
You got coffee. I've got whiskey, so we're all good, right? Isn't that how it works?
Exactly right. Exactly.
James is also going to be kind of on the sideline for this one. He's got his Mountain Dew. We're having a little bit of a snafu with James and Kane actually being able to hear each other, but we'll get through it. It's a live show. This is what we're all about here. So So it's morning time for you. And Kane, I guess I'll give you the introduction. You're the host on Locked On Bucks, very popular podcast, at least here in Milwaukee and the state of Wisconsin. I know around the NBA as well. I know you've been doing that for a while. For people maybe that aren't quite as familiar with you at this point, can you just kind of give us a quick scope of what else you're doing and how important that is right now in your life and your career, and some of the things that's going on in your hometown?
Yeah, so Locked On Bucks is Monday to Friday podcast, and I'm in my third season of doing that. Our friend Eric Name, who now works at The Athletic, he was originally doing the podcast as well. So it's been a podcast that's been around for about 5 years now, and it is popular in Milwaukee. Also popular now in Greece, which may or may not surprise you, Craig, and there might be an obvious reason for why that's the case. But a lot of people that don't know that I've been in Milwaukee for a number of years and those types of things, from now, every now and then will comment on YouTube and they'll just say, why is there an Australian guy hosting this podcast? This is absolutely ridiculous. But I did spend a number of years in Milwaukee, really from 2015 through to almost COVID. I was there a lot. I was there full time from 2018 through to the pandemic. So a couple of seasons there, pretty much since Mike Budenholzer came to town. I was in town as well, and I do a bunch of stuff for ESPN here in Australia as well, writing, podcasting, bit of TV stuff. So it's a little bit different, a little bit challenging doing it from Australia and not being over there in the US. But I think for the most part, I'm pretty fortunate that I can still do that and still work. And Zoom's been a big help for that the last couple of years for sure.
Well, I know you've done a ton of interviews for magazines and a ton for television stories, and you were here in Milwaukee as kind of the buildup, as you mentioned, during the Bud era. I mean, you've been a part of it, and unfortunately, you weren't able to be here in person a year ago for the championship run, but. I found it interesting in some of the stories that you were a part of when you said how you got your beginning interest in Milwaukee Bucks basketball was back in 2001, which I'm like, was that kid even born in 2001? But that's the first year I actually started covering the Bucks. So I've got a few years on you, but I think that 01 date is significant for both of us because I was working in local sports and then came in 01 to start my job covering Bucks basketball on television. But you were just getting interested in the Bucks back then. How old were you, and why did you get interested in the Bucks back in 2001?
Well, I'll say this: we both got sold a different story when we were watching that 2001 team, when we thought that was the norm and this team is great and they're winning a lot of games, and then we had about 15 years of not so much winning. So that was unfortunate for us, but there wasn't. I was 11 or 12 around that time, and there wasn't too many NBA games on TV here in Australia at all. But during the postseason, during the playoffs, you could get the occasional game. And I remember watching a second round series game. They were playing Charlotte, and Ray Allen just went absolutely nuts. And honestly, it was as simple as that. I was like, the Bucks are pretty cool. They've got cool colors. The arena's going nuts. Ray Allen looks like a fun player to support. So I figured I may as well just keep watching this Milwaukee team. So I always loved Ray Allen. And certainly the next few years, they weren't winning as many games. The Ray Allen trade went down. And I was like, okay, well, we'll just keep up. I was keeping track of box scores, all those types of things. Then, of course, they drafted an Australian. They drafted Andrew Bogut with the first pick. And then, in a sort of weird way, the Milwaukee Bucks were on TV more than any other team in Australia, which is just crazy to think about. But they were on TV at least once a week, so we could watch NBA games on TV, which was really rare here. They would air the Bucks TV. I think it was an online show. I'm not sure, but Jim Paschke was hosting the show. So we actually had a half an hour TV show in Australia once a week where Jim Paschke, I don't even know if he knows this. I never told him this, but he had a half an hour show in Australia back in sort of 2005, 2006, 2007. So they actually became a pretty popular team in Australia, which is, again, pretty strange.
Well, don't tell Jim about that because he has a tendency to put past invoices in. So
yeah, that's right.
That's
I'm
right.
not sure if that TV channel is still around, so perhaps he wouldn't be getting much money back. Who knows?
Well, don't tell him that either. He'll think he crushed the ratings book on that one. So okay. So you're interested in the Bucks, and so how did you then, as a younger individual, say, you know what, I might want to do this, professionally? What was the inspiration, and what was I mean, how did you connect yourself a half a world away to doing what you're doing now?
Well, it was a long sort of path. So I finished high school and I went straight to work. So I was working as a tradesman. I was working in oil and gas from straight out of high school for 10 years. I didn't go to college or university or anything like that to study journalism. That came a lot later. I just honestly didn't really like my job. I was traveling back and forward trying to catch NBA games as a fan a little bit. And one time I was coming to the US, this was around 2016, and I had someone suggest to me, they're like, well, you're spending so much time watching the NBA. Why wouldn't you find somewhere to talk about it or write about it? And I was like, I don't know about that. That sounds crazy. I've never thought about doing that. So I just started writing a little bit for this basketball website in Australia. And they were like, this is pretty good. You should maybe consider doing a little bit more of this. And I was traveling to the US. So they said, we can get you a media pass for a couple of games while you're over there. And you can just see how you like it. See if this is something that you want to do. So I went on the Bucks were on a West Coast trip. So the first game I covered was Bucks and Clippers at Staples Center. This was back in, I think, 2016 or 2017. And it made sense. At the time, they had two Australians. They had Matthew Dellavedova. They had Thon Maker on the team. So I went around and I was just hanging around the Bucks on this West Coast trip. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I'm like, I've been to NBA games, but now I'm at practice and Giannis is standing right there. And then I'm going to games in LA and I'm at Staples Center and I'm in the locker room and all this sort of stuff. So I thought to myself, this is pretty cool. I think maybe this is what I want to be doing if this is possible to make it happen. So then the wheels started turning from there. So I had to basically quit my career, move to the US and just see what happens. See if I could make something happen, see if I could sell some stories, see if people were interested in my work. So that's literally how it started. I just quit my job, moved over and thought, let's see if we can make this a thing.
Tell us about the difficulties of doing that now, and now you got your feet on the ground, and now what do you do? Because you're basically blazing a trail, if you will, in doing what you're doing and making a major decision in life. But there's no blueprint for it. How did you make it work? What were the ups and downs of where we sit today talking with you?
Well, there was a few challenges, and probably the biggest challenge was just the visa stuff. So basically, long story short, I could get a visa to the US as a foreign media representative, but it stopped me from earning any money in the US. So I couldn't go to, if I had a story, for instance, and I wanted to go to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and say, I've got this story, do you want to buy this story? They couldn't because they weren't legally allowed to pay me. So that restricted my ability to actually make money. So I probably needed time. I needed time to make this career work. But the problem was that it was like, okay, how do I sell stories to people in Australia that have never heard of me and major media outlets and that sort of stuff? So one story that I told, so Matthew Dellavedova is now playing basketball in Melbourne. I live in Melbourne, so I see him all the time. And I've told him this. The first time I ever made money from selling a story, I went to Milwaukee. I would talk to him. I would interview him. He was always great to me with his time. But I couldn't sell a story. I was sending emails out and I wasn't getting responses. No one wanted to pay for any of the work. So I'm in Milwaukee starting to stress out, thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to make a cent. And then I'm just going to go back to Australia and go back to my old career. And Dally got traded to Cleveland. This was early in the 2018-19 season. So then I'm thinking to myself, well, I moved here thinking I could make money off these Australian players and Australian stories and get to know them. And now he's been traded. So what am I going to do? But that ended up being the first story that I sold, was Dally getting traded, because I emailed a couple of newspapers here in Australia. I said, he's just been traded. I'm in Milwaukee. I can speak to him. And so that's the big joke now. I thought I was moving to Milwaukee to make money talking about Dally playing basketball in Milwaukee and all these great stories we could have. And in the end, him getting traded was my first break in the industry. So I thank him for that. I thank John Horst for that. They gave me my start with that trade. So that's how it works out.
So that must be where "In Horst We Trust" really started, right?
Exactly right. That's I always liked John Horst. He gave me my first check in sports media. It's incredible.
Well, that's good stuff. And then you end up in back home in Australia, as it all turns out. And then I guess just in a nutshell, just to bring us up, how did you get connected with Locked On and ESPN and stuff? And is that pretty much now? Is that your bread and butter? Is that working out for you, saying this is my career here right now?
Yeah, it was weird because I thought at the time during the 2020 season, I thought that I was going to be around and would have another long playoff run, like everyone did, probably similar to the season before. And then the pandemic hit, and once the NBA shut down, I was like, well, I don't have any work here anymore. This seems kind of crazy. I don't know if this is going to be a 1 month thing, but I thought to myself, I should probably just go home and wait it out for a couple of months. So Eric Name, again, who I'm great friends with, I left a bunch of stuff with him. Mostly winter clothes, which, by the way, I don't need in Australia anyway, so that's totally fine. But he dropped me to the airport. I left within 24 hours of the NBA shutting down. I said, I'll be back in a month. Just hold my stuff. I'll be back in a month. Now it's been 2 years, so shout out to Eric for still hanging on to all my stuff. Or maybe he sold it. I don't know. I haven't asked him. But I came back to Australia, and then when it became a long-term thing, the problem for me was that in Australian sports media, nobody knew who I was because the only work that I'd done was in the US. So I then had to go through the same process again of trying to start again and have people know who I am and give them a reason. Why would they let me work? Lots of people want to work in sports media. Why would they take my story? So I basically just leveraged the contacts that I had in the US and told people, well, I've been in the US. I know people around the NBA. I can get this story. This is why it makes sense to give me work. And ESPN have been great. I just gradually got more and more work with them to the point now where it's my job. It's day to day. I work for ESPN, and it's weird how the pandemic worked out like that for me. I know it's been bad for many reasons, but from a work perspective for me, it's funny that it worked out. And now I'm probably, if things go back to normal, in a better spot to come back to the US than I was when it all first happened. So it's been a weird couple of years, but from a work standpoint, I guess for me, I've been lucky. It's been a good one.
Has it been really good from the standpoint that there's more than a handful of players from Australia that have either played in the NBA, especially during your time, or are currently playing right now, to keep that live connection, so you're not just focusing in on Delhi or Andrew Bogut at this time. I mean, you've got a good list of guys that you're covering right now, right? Yeah,
and it's the Australian League, so the NBL is the Australian basketball league over here, and they've got such a great connection with the NBA now. We had LaMelo Ball was out here 2 seasons ago. Now he's over there, so there's that link. Josh Giddey, who just had a triple-double at Madison Square Garden, he was playing in Australia last year. And then there's just a bunch of former NBA players that are back here playing at the moment. I already mentioned Delhi. And so there's a great link between those two leagues. So you can connect it. The Australian basketball scene is more legitimate than it's ever been, which helps. If you did this 6 years ago, it's probably not the case because no one viewed the Australian League as a pathway to the NBA. But that's changed now. So it does make it easier. It's easier to get work. And just in general, more people in Australia are interested in basketball. There's NBA on TV every single day. Every single show that you guys watch over there is here in Australia. Craig, this is what I always tell people. When I first moved to Milwaukee, I see people like yourself and Jim and John McLaughlin and all these guys, and I'm telling them, I'm like, listen, I've been watching you guys on TV for 15 years. And that's sometimes I think people in the US with League Pass and those types of things maybe aren't totally aware of where people are watching, but there's a lot of people in Australia watching you and in the studio show, Craig, and the Bucks broadcast on Bally Sports and all that type of thing. So it's global. It makes it easier to work.
And another reason to invoice, Kane.
Yeah, maybe you can now. Maybe you should be now as well. You can make some money.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, one final question before we talk a little bit of Bucks, and I think really the most obvious one at this point is, Is it a 17-hour difference roughly? And how in the world do you manage that?
Well, it's nearly 9:30 here now, so it's 4:30. Yeah, so we're a fair way ahead. It's always changing. I can't keep up. But the one thing I always say is that it's weird that it's easier to cover the NBA in Australia than it is in the US. And the reason for that is we can do this podcast and I can say to you, I can talk to you literally anytime from 4 p.m. onwards. And if I'm doing a post game show for Locked On Bucks, for me, I'm doing it at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Good point.
Whereas when I was in the US, you're at a game, you go to post game media, you go in the locker room, you walk out of the arena, you get home at 1:00 in the morning, and then you're recording a post game show. So I don't get the access. I'm not in the arena, which is what I miss the most. But in terms of doing a show like this, it's actually oddly easier. It's easier to do. The timing is great. I clock off at 5 p.m. Beautiful.
You got the 9 to 5 job, don't you?
Wow. I always said I would never work 9 to 5, but I guess I technically am now. So what do you do?
Well, we know one thing. If you do get back here, and we certainly hope you do, and get back to normal life back here and have the opportunity to live here and cover this team in the NBA, that would be great to get you back on the night shift schedule. So that's what it's all about out here. Let's talk. I guess first of all, anybody who's watching or listening, if you have a question at all you'd like to ask Kane, and with his unique standing and covering the Bucks in the NBA, drop us a quick text here through our comments, and we'll get it on and take it from there. But let's talk a little current Bucks basketball here right now, and go really current, because John Horst obviously just made a trade a few days ago at the trade deadline last week, I should say, for Serge Ibaka. Let's just start with him first and foremost. If you're like me, you knew something, excuse me, was going to go down, because John and his staff are just that good. When you heard Serge, what was your initial reaction, and what do you think he's going to be able to do down the stretch?
Yeah, I didn't think it was. Well, first of all, I agree with you. Yes, I was saying the same thing. I said, look, John Horst is a trader. He's proven that over the last 3 years. He likes to make deals, and he likes to get deals done. And if he sees a hole in the roster, he's going to do something to try and fix that. And I think for the most part this season, we've all looked at this Bucks team without Brook Lopez and said, geez, they are small. This is a small team. You're forced to play Giannis in different positions, play him at center a lot, which I don't think over the course of a regular season is great for Giannis, just in terms of wear and tear. So they've tried a couple of guys. They tried DeMarcus Cousins. Obviously, Greg Monroe recently came back to the team. So I wasn't surprised that they would look to bring in a big guy. I didn't think that the Clippers would trade Serge Ibaka. Now, I know he's been playing sort of a minimalized role. He's a little bit older now. He's not prime Serge Ibaka. But for a Clippers team that I think wants to make the playoffs and wants to do some damage in the playoffs, they're hopeful of getting some players back. I was just a little surprised that they traded him, which made me wonder, well, how much does he have in the tank? I haven't seen him play a lot. He was playing 15 minutes per game, but I think we've seen in the first couple of games, and it's a super small sample size, but he can still get up the floor. He can still block a couple of shots. He can shoot the outside three. So I think in a perfect world, you still get Brook Lopez back, and Serge Ibaka is more insurance as a backup. But I think he's better than anything else they've had in terms of the other guys they've tried to bring in as big man insurance. So I like the move. I like Dante DiVincenzo. I think he's going to be a great player in the NBA as a role player wherever he goes. He's had an impact already in his first game. But I just think the Bucks needed a big, so I like the trade.
Don't you think too, with guys that have been around a long time that come into a new setting, and I think we saw this with PJ Tucker a little bit last year too. It's hard to fully judge a guy's career and what he brings to a new team early on. I mean, yeah. I think with him, a guy like PJ too, and with Serge, I think we're really going to know what he brings after being here a month, or when we hit, the end of March, beginning of April, and there's just a few regular season games to go, and you're starting to think more how this team is going to shape up and who's in the rotation, come playoff time when that happens in mid-April. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think a lot of people forget that PJ Tucker in the regular season last year was not very impressive.
Right.
And the numbers weren't good. He wasn't shooting the three well. And then we know, obviously, what he brought in the postseason. So I'd agree with that. It's a guy that's been in the playoffs a lot, championship player. And I think the biggest thing is that he's played these two games, only one of those games with Giannis. He wasn't playing alongside Giannis in LA. And when you talk about what these guys can do defensively, it's Giannis that lifts everyone else around them and can maximize what they can do, particularly defensively. So, I think we're going to need a few weeks here. I think you're right. You can't make any assumptions based off one game. For me, again, it was just the mobility. Does he look like he can move up and down the floor and still provide some things? And yeah, I think the signs have been good. But overall, in terms of how this team fits together, I think you're right. We're going to need a few weeks at least for him to get acclimatized to what the Bucks are trying to do.
So then today, DeAndre Bembry officially signed by the Bucks as well. The Nets had to cut him loose when they made their deal to get Ben Simmons and trade away for the big deals that they made as well, which I think a lot of people are like, well, you know, you're letting a pretty decent guy go. He doesn't have real impressive numbers, but he's kind of a two-way player, has that swingman size. It's hard to look at his stats at maybe 4 or 5, 6 points a game, 3 or 4 rebounds a game and say this guy's going to be significant. But do you think you have to just look at age-wise and athleticism and ability-wise and the fact that, you know, he played for Bud in Atlanta a few years back to see maybe what his impact's going to be?
Well, the Bucks really have a need now for a player like Bembry as well, because Pat Connaughton is obviously going to be out for the next month. Dante DiVincenzo, as we mentioned, is traded out. George Hill's dealing with some neck stuff. Wesley Matthews missed the game yesterday. So whether or not he's a guy that fits in a playoff rotation, if fingers crossed everyone's back, I think remains to be seen. But he is a guy that I think will play right away, because they need minutes at those positions. So the other thing that the Bucks did at the trade deadline, part of the deal, they moved on Shemi Ojeleye and Rodney Hood. So they actually only were, right now, they're at 13 guys on the roster. So they still have a couple of roster spots. They lost to some guys that weren't having a great season, but would soak up some minutes. We saw Rodney Hood would play 10 minutes a game when he came in. So I see that more as what Bembry's going to do. If there's more upside than that, that's great if you're the Bucks. But right now, he's a guy that they need for sure.
How about Goran Dragic? His name's obviously been floating out there with not only potentially to land in Milwaukee, but Miami, the Lakers. He's had an interesting year. He hasn't played a ton, and he's been around too. You talk about age-wise. Do you see the Bucks doing something on that route, or do you think this, the Bembry signing maybe is it, and they wait for this team to get healthier here in the next month or so?
Well, Dragic is kind of a Bucks villain. They've had a couple of playoff series against Miami over the last few seasons, but he is a guy that is a veteran that can come in and again, I think help. As you pointed to, he hasn't played a lot this year, so how much does he have left in the tank? It's kind of hard to say, but I think with the Bucks, with the roster spots that they have, you would rather have Dragic on your roster than see him go to another team in the Eastern Conference, particularly a team like Miami. So all the reports suggest that Milwaukee is right at the top of the list, potentially with the Heat there. And the way that I always look at it, if you're a buyout player or you're a veteran player, there's two things that you want to look at. One, can you win a championship? Because he's 35. He wants to win a title. He'll be 36 soon. You come to Milwaukee, you have a great opportunity to do that. And secondly, these guys also want to play a little bit. They don't want to just come somewhere and sit on the bench. And I think that he'll do that in Milwaukee because, as we mentioned, there is a hole in the guard rotation there, question marks over George Hill. So I think they tick both boxes that you need to. It's whether or not he has maybe some relationships in Miami that he wants to go back and play with some friends down there or with the franchise. I would imagine that it's out of Miami and Milwaukee. I can't see why he would want to go to the Lakers. Why would he want to go and play for the Lakers? That doesn't make sense to me.
No, I agree 100%. I'm not sure anybody wants to go there at this point. I mean, I think maybe even after the Bucks win their last week, they threw up the white flag. It sure seemed like it at this point. And they didn't make any moves. But they get enough attention on a daily basis nationally, so we don't need to give them any. Before I let you go, thoughts on Giannis and his development again, and I say development, Kane, because you followed this team long enough to know that every year he always says, whether he wins the MVP and now a world championship, that he is going to improve and still get better, and he has this year in some real critical ways. Obviously, free throw shooting. I think the point now is being brought up that, if you follow him closely, he's not letting offensive fouls be detrimental to his game. He's a smarter guy, and he's telling dad jokes right now, corny knock-knock type jokes. So what's not to love about this guy? But just your thoughts on what you've seen with maybe a different Giannis here so far this season.
Well, that's my type of humor, by the way. So I'm an easy audience, so he's always making me laugh. But we saw yesterday, I mean, we're recording this. We saw last night one of the easiest 50s. And I don't know if easy is the right word, but certainly physically dominant. There was nothing that the opposition could do. You scored 50 points on 21 shots. Last week, you mentioned the game in LA. It was similar, 40 plus on crazy efficiency. I think he was 17 for 20 in that game. So this is the big thing, that more consistently, we're just seeing that he knows, he understands that there's nothing that the other team can do. Literally nothing. And he did it on the biggest stage. He did it in the NBA Finals. So for him, playing a regular season game on a Tuesday night in February, he knows that he can go out and score 50. I think that he's gotten smarter about looking after his body, choosing when to attack, when to shoot the jump shot. And everyone talks about the jump shot being a part of the development of his game. And obviously it is. But I also think that he's shown an awareness of nights where, okay, maybe I don't want to play this physically dominant style every single night for 82 games. This is going to wear me out. How can I make this a little bit easier for me? I can facilitate a little bit more. I can shoot a few more jump shots. This is better for my body. I can take care of myself. Because he learned last year. Ultimately, for this Bucks team, they probably would like to have the number 1 seed. That would be great. But they were the number 3 seed last year. They didn't have home court in the finals, and they won the title. So it's about timing. It's about understanding your own body. So I think that's, for me, where he's developed the most. I think it's just the experience, the mental side of the game, and probably just unplugging. I mean, you mentioned the jokes, but obviously he's a dad now. Yeah. He's always been a family man. But there's a lot of other things going on for him, and I think that he's got more of an awareness now of how to approach an NBA season, which is crazy. I mean, he's only just in his prime. He's only 27. Mm-hmm. I was looking it up this morning. So he's actually leading this scoring now in the NBA, 29.4 points per game. As far as I can tell, and I might be wrong, but as far as I can tell, the only player to win MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and the scoring title in the same season was Jordan in 1988. Giannis has to be in the mix. He has to be in the mix to pick up those 3 awards this year. So everything he's doing is historic.
I'm right on with you on that. It'd be fun. Well, it has been fun to watch, and it's going to be even more fun down the stretch when each one of these games becomes a little more meaningful, to be sure. So, do you see the Bucks rising among the top in the East? How do you see the East kind of shaping up here right now?
I don't know. It's tough. I was looking at the standings earlier, and if the season ended today and they went through the play-in tournament, you would have Miami and Brooklyn as a first-round series. So it's going to be tough. The way I look at it is, I didn't think last year the Bucks could win the title, and it wasn't a knock on the Bucks or what they were capable of. It was more just how challenging it is to win a championship, and you need a lot of luck, and timing is everything, health-wise, everything like that. So they can win it for sure. And because the biggest thing is they know they can win it because they've already done it. They don't have the mental block that they carried potentially in other seasons. So they can win it. It's hard for me to pick which team would be the favorite right now, though, in the East. I think it's going to come down to luck and timing.
I think it's pretty incredible that we're in an era right now where the Bucks are defending champs, and they are the team that all other teams are not only trying to beat, but forming and building their own franchises to try to climb the mountain and knock Milwaukee off the top, which is a pretty cool thing to say at this point. That's for sure. All right, my last one for you, since it's happy hour in the United States. What's the big drink? What's the favorite drink in Australia?
Well, I'm a pretty simple guy. And by the way, this suited me when I went to Milwaukee. I'll drink beer, so I'll drink craft beer, whatever. I don't know if I don't. There's a brewery in the Third Ward, Broken Bat Brewery. I don't know if you've ever been there, but they're big baseball guys.
Yeah.
And I know you obviously cover the Brewers, so you can
Oh,
go
yeah.
there, watch Brewers games anytime you want. You drink out of these baseball bat mugs. It's a great time down there. So I miss that place, but I'm an easy guy. I can just drink beer.
Perfect. Well, I think I know maybe then at a young age why you gravitated to the city of Milwaukee. Then it was was destiny, Kane.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, I felt right at home. Australia and Milwaukee are pretty similar cultures, I would say.
Well, my friend, appreciate your time. Great sharing your story and talking some Bucks and NBA basketball with you, Kane.
Anytime, and hopefully I'll be back over there soon. Hopefully in a few months. I got to sort out this passport.
Give us a heads up, and we'll reserve a spot over at Broken Bat for a big party. All right, that sounds pretty good.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to it, Craig. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, that's Kane Pitman. Thanks very much, Kane, and we'll hopefully bring James back in the mix, my man. How are you?
I'm good. Figured I'd just get out of the way. You guys are rolling.
So now, here's we had a little audio issues, which sometimes you don't expect and whatnot.
Live,
so
right?
Unfortunately, Kane couldn't hear you. So yeah,
yeah, that's live internet podcast, all that stuff. So, but it worked out. I mean, I think you guys had a good interview, and Kane's got a really cool story, and I encourage everyone to check out his Locked On Bucks podcast because it's daily and they got a lot of good stuff going on there.
They really do, and it's I mean, you just can't get enough basketball talk here right now. It's I think this is one of the reasons that you and I started doing this as well, James. I think you can go about anywhere and talk baseball, and certainly you can go anywhere and talk Packer football. But I think the audience for basketball is a little more dialed in. And they do a great job for sure. So it'd be great to have him back here in Milwaukee. And but sure. Again, it's a unique story. So
yeah, it's really such a cool story just to see like that. He's basically covering from across the world, and it also just shows you that we say the NBA is a global game, which it is, but it also shows you kind of like there's a global fandom as well that we're all kind of connected surrounding these teams and. And it's a cool world to know that, that I'm kind of cheering for the same team that someone in Australia is cheering for, and et cetera. So it's a cool story that I wanted to kind of give some light to if people didn't know.
Well, James pretty much set this up with Kane. That's why I feel bad that audio-wise, for whatever reason, it didn't work out between the connection that we had, but that's how life rolls, and he was good regardless, and we're glad to share the story. So now the thing about it is, when you talk a little bit more about the Bucks here, James, we've got the Sixers coming up on Thursday night. So let's talk a little bit about that setup because it's Joel Embiid and it's Giannis, and it's Giannis and Embiid right now, 1-2, right, in the scoring. Is that? Yep. Is that what I remember seeing?
By 0.1, I believe.
So Embiid had like a 19-point game or something like that last night, and Giannis had a 50. So, I mean, Giannis knows what he's doing, right? I mean,
and that's the interesting thing about this is as far as like the team matchup, obviously with the trades that they made, they won't have Seth Curry. So then they won't have James Harden yet either. But the thing that I'll be kind of watching is to see the intensity between the Giannis and Embiid matchup, whether they're guarding each other or not. Because I think we've seen a couple interviews where Embiid has kind of hinted at that, like, yeah, he wants the MVP. And I know that Giannis is a competitive person, and he's not going to just let Joel go off for 50 and do nothing about it. You know what I mean? So if Joel comes with that energy, I'm assuming Giannis is going to match it.
Well, I think that if you think about this, there's a lot of good matchups in the NBA, if not great matchups, when the season begins.
Yeah.
You say, hey, Sixers Bucks, Sixers Nets, Lakers Bucks, Lakers, whoever. But I think this is one of the few, and sometimes we're kind of still in that realm of we're not ever sure sometimes who's going to be able to play on certain nights. But this is one where these two big guys are going head to head, and I think it's great that Giannis embraces the fact that it's it's pretty much he knows he's in the spotlight here, and he put up a nice primer against the Pacers, and this is again one of the things that you have to appreciate out of an elite athlete like him. And I know Joel Embiid's thinking the same thing. They're ready for this clash. They're not saying I'm bumped or bruised or anything like that. They're ready to go at it, and I'm sure they're going to go at it full blown because it's an opportunity to brag, compete, and to get better at this point.
Especially we know if it's close at the end of the year as far as the MVP vote. The obvious thing to look at is the head-to-head matchup. And, we can say that this game happened without James Harden or whatever, but at the end of the day, they're going to look at the record and say, what did you do in the games that Giannis was in? What did you do in the games that Joel was in? Down the line. What did you do when DeRozan, or what did you do when Jokic was here? All that stuff is going to matter when it comes down to voting for the MVP. And, especially Giannis and all those guys will say that that's not what they're focused on. But I think we all know that if you're that much of a competitor, that they definitely are aware that the head-to-head matchup matters. Aside from just winning the game and getting your team, in a better position.
That's interesting. You bring that up because I can't remember now who it was. Was it Harden last year, or was it Irving? I think it was in that Nets Bucks playoff series that in the regular season, one or two of those guys didn't play in any of the regular season games.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I'm pretty sure it was Harden,
which would shock everybody.
Right. Right. But I mean, it does matter. We all know that the MVP to a degree is numbers based, but once the numbers get close enough, it becomes, story based. And if Joel goes out and dominates, especially without James Harden, that's a good feather to have in your cap come MVP time.
All right, James, I have one I'm already laughing at this. I have one final topic.
Yeah.
And it's Valentine's week, right?
Okay.
Monday was Valentine's Day, and a couple of days later, Aaron Rodgers and Shailene Woodley break up. I mean, that's just a shocker to me. But it's true. In case people haven't heard the news, they broke up and their engagement's off.
Well, I guess there's two ways to look at this. Either she really, really loved Green Bay and he's leaving, and now she's mad, so they broke up.
Was she ever in Green Bay?
Or, like every other girlfriend that he's had, Packer fans are now gonna say that she was the excuse, she was the thing that was occupying his mind, and that's why they lost. So now he's a single man again and ready to get another MVP, I guess.
So I would argue that since she wasn't seen the whole season, that she wasn't around until the playoff game.
Yeah.
And she must have been in a suite somewhere and they didn't know it because he didn't play well. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I feel like it's one of the more ridiculous but somehow still enjoyable storylines that Packer fans have gone with every single time, whether it was Shailene Woodley, Danica Patrick, what was the other?
Another actress.
I can't think of her name right now, but either way,
yeah.
Every time he has a
they don't know our names either, so don't feel bad.
Exactly. But every time he has a famous girlfriend, she becomes the reason why he's distracted.
Yep, indeed. Well, anyway, I just had to bring that up, and I trust that you had a good Valentine's after your beautiful wife returned from vacation.
I did. It was Olivia Munn. That's who it was.
Oh yes.
I had a great Valentine's Day. My wife is the best.
Good. I got out of town, so that My wife said I'm the best.
Yeah.
It's all good. Well, listen, pal. I'm sorry that the technical thing happened with Kane, and you couldn't join in on that. But you know, it was good to have him on, and we hope to have more guests like that on here on our future shows. So we're looking forward to that. You got anything else to close out with?
No, man. Just like I said earlier, let's see what the two kind of MVP leaders are doing tomorrow night. Should be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, we'll watch that, and then Giannis and Thanasis and Alex, the Antetokounmpo brothers, are going to be in the skills challenge. That's Saturday night, right? Or is that Friday night? I think it's Saturday night or Saturday at some point.
Yeah, it is Saturday night because that's when the dunk contest and all that stuff is.
And then the All-Star game on Sunday night when Giannis and Chris are not on the same team. Chris Middleton and Giannis not on the same team, so it's going to be. Do you think Coach Bud said you're not allowed to guard each other, foul each other, no block shots by Giannis? You think Coach Bud has a word in on that?
He probably said, "Don't do anything that you do in practice and show someone how to guard you."
There you go. There you go.
All
right, buddy. Good stuff. I'm getting a spam risk call, so I got to knock that one out. But
okay.
Good stuff, pal. We'll wrap it up. Another edition of Coshun Cast. We'll be back later on to talk more about the Sixers, the All-Star break, and see where we go from here. Good stuff, James.